The Zeus Mission, a simple retelling. They called it the lockdown, and it wasn't a war at first. There were no battles or warning shots, just silence cutting off every direction. It was like someone had reached across the galaxy and turned off all the stars. 1 minute, Earth was a small voice connected to a vast network of trade routes, colonies, and diplomatic channels. The next minute, we were nothing but static. A forgotten frequency floating in space. The outer colonies vanished first. No shuttles came back. No one answered distress signals. Orbital stations reported ghost fleets drifting beyond scanning range. Ships would shimmer and blink out before anyone could get a proper look at them. Then our satellites started dropping like flies, pulled down by forces no one could explain. That was 12 years ago. I was 27 when it happened. Now I'm a worn-out shell of that man, older and colder, still breathing only because of one thing, Zeus. They said humanity was too arrogant to think we belonged among the stars. The ones behind the lockdown, who called themselves the Coalition, decided Earth had gone too far. We had evolved too fast and bred too violently. They didn't fear us for what we were, but for what we might become. So they caged us like dangerous animals. The worst part was that we didn't fight back. When the lockdown began, the world panicked. Economies collapsed overnight. Riots broke out in every major city. Governments folded in on themselves, fighting over scraps like rats in a burning barn. Earth's unity shattered completely. No one knew how to respond to a war that had no front lines, just endless silence. But in the ashes of civilization, someone whispered a different plan. Zeus wasn't born in a corporate boardroom or a military laboratory. It was built deep underground, in the bones of an old Siberian base that everyone thought had been abandoned since the Cold War. It wasn't built by governments, but by men like me. Veterans, scientists, rogues, outlaws, and survivors who refused to kneel before alien powers. There was no blueprint for Zeus. It wasn't designed to be just a ship, a weapon, or even a machine. It was meant to be a message. The message was simple. If you block Earth from the stars, then Earth will make its own star. We would create a god of thunder and fire that would tear through whatever stood in our way. We didn't have the advanced technology that the Coalition possessed. We had no warp drives or clean energy cores. Instead, we stole everything we needed. We mined radioactive wastelands, stripped parts from ancient satellites, and reverse-engineered whatever alien technology we had salvaged before the lockdown began. Piece by piece, with bleeding hands and sleepless months, we forged Zeus. We built it not in peace or hope, but in pure hatred. We didn't know if Zeus would fly, or if it would kill us before it ever left the ground. All we knew was that we couldn't sit and rot any longer. While the Coalition watched from the darkness, smug in their silence. My name doesn't matter anymore, but I was the first man chosen to pilot Zeus during its atmospheric test run. I remember the roar when we first fired up the engines. It wasn't like thunder. It was deeper, like the planet itself was screaming in defiance. The test flight killed 17 engineers when one of the core rings imploded mid-flight. We lost 3 test pilots before me. They were either burned alive or turned to vapor in seconds. Still, we kept building because Zeus wasn't just a weapon. It was Earth's answer to those who thought we would die quietly and fade away like a forgotten rumor. But we've always been a species that crawls out of the dirt, angry and determined. Now Zeus was finally ready. The orbital breach was scheduled. In 3 days, the final launch would crack the sky open. We knew the Coalition would see it, and that was exactly the point. We wanted them to feel fear for once. We wanted them to remember what happens when you cage something with fire in its blood. We weren't reaching out to the stars anymore. We were reaching through them. Whatever barriers they had put between us and the cosmos, we would tear them down, bolt by bolt, until the heavens remembered the name of Earth again. They called it a launch. But that word was too clean and controlled. This wasn't some polished space agency spectacle with countdowns and press conferences. There were no spectators or speeches, just thunder, metal, fire, and a growing storm of uncertainty in my chest. Zeus wasn't really a spacecraft. It was a statement made of pure vengeance. Standing beneath it felt like staring up at a giant made from the worst parts of our species. It had nuclear engines, stolen alien technology, and systems powered more by rage than reason. The ship stood 600 meters tall, coiled with turbines that hummed like something alive. In the middle of that mechanical beast, buried deep inside its black heart, sat the cockpit that would take me out of the atmosphere and into whatever hell waited above. I hadn't slept in 2 days. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't let myself. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the old world before the lockdown. I remember the last time I had looked up and seen real stars, not satellites or orbital debris, but actual stars glimmering in the sky without any filters. Back then, people still dreamed of great things. Now they just survived from day to day. I pulled the safety harness tight across my chest. The restraints were crude, bolted into metal that hadn't been sanded smooth. This entire operation was held together by desperation, built by people who knew time was running out. There was no budget, no safety net, just a mission. We had to breach the blockade, send a signal, and let the galaxy know that Earth hadn't choked to death in silence. "You're quiet." A voice buzzed in my ear. It was Marcus, the head of operations for Zeus Ground Command. He was one of the last men I trusted with my life. He had been military once, same as me. He had lost 2 sons in the food riots during the early lockdown years. Ever since then, he worked like a man trying to bleed out his grief through constant action, just breathing. "Iden," I replied, staring at the flickering control interface. He chuckled. "First man to ride a weapon this big, and he still pretends to be poetic." "Not pretending," I said. "Just wondering if this thing's going to make it out of the atmosphere without taking me with it." There was a pause, then his voice came back. Harder. "It better, because if it doesn't, we don't have a plan B." That was the truth. Zeus was our last card, the only option Earth had left. The countdown began. Not from 10 like in the old movies, but from 5. Every second felt like a scream building in my chest. 5. The ignition core spun up, sending violent vibrations through the entire cabin. Every bone in my body rattled like I was being shaken apart. The outer shielding plate slammed into place, cutting off the last sliver of natural light from the porthole. I was sealed inside a metal tomb. 3. The reactor let out a deep, humming growl like something massive waking up. It wasn't just nuclear power. There were plasma elements, fusion boosters, and something else we had reverse engineered from alien technology found before the lockdown. We didn't fully understand how it worked, but it did work, and that was all we cared about. 2. My breathing slowed as I prepared myself. This was it. Once I left Earth's atmosphere, there was no guarantee I would ever come back. There were no rescue teams waiting in orbit, no home base to return to, just silence and the unknown. 1. Then the world fell away beneath me. Zeus didn't just launch. It tore itself from Earth like a wild beast breaking free from a cage. The force pinned me so hard into my seat that I thought my spine would snap. The sky outside my window went from black to red. 2 blazing white, sensors overloaded with readings. A warning alarm blared in my ears, screaming about too much G-force, too much speed, and whole stress at maximum levels. Internal temperature was spiking beyond safe limits. But Zeus held together. By the time we broke through Earth's upper atmosphere, I was drenched in sweat and half blind from blood rushing to my skull. But we were still moving, still alive, still climbing toward the stars. And then I saw it. The real sky, cold and empty and unfiltered. The stars were there, but not as I remembered them. The blockade wasn't a simple wall or a single line of defense. It was a vast field, a deadly net of dark structures scattered like landmines across Earth's orbital space. They hovered there, invisible to the naked eye until you crossed a certain threshold. Then they revealed themselves like sharks rising from the ocean depths. I saw massive obelisks, spike constructs, and machinery that looked like it had been carved from black ice and bone. Everything about them screamed alien, unwelcoming, and dangerous. They had been waiting there, watching Earth like prison guards. Zeus's systems pinged off one of the structures, a massive thing hanging just beyond lunar orbit. The moment we locked onto its signal, it responded immediately. A shimmer tore through space and a pulse blasted toward us. It wasn't a weapon at first, but a message. It came through in broken translation, synthetic and cold. Return to Earth. Breach equals extermination. I actually laughed when I heard that. It was too late for warnings now. I diverted power to Zeus's pulse shields, bracing for impact. But the message wasn't really a warning. It was a scan, deep and intrusive. The aliens were trying to read us, to understand what Zeus was and what I was. Their reply came fast. Another pulse, and this time it hit hard. My screen exploded with static. Alarms howled throughout the ship. The left thruster went offline. Hull integrity was dropping rapidly. The outer shell, layered with Earth's best half-understood defense technology, held together, but only just barely. The aliens weren't playing games anymore. "Marcus," I barked into the communications system. "They're engaging." His voice crackled through, filled with tension. "You push through. Forget the original protocol. Use the Thunderhead." I paused. The Thunderhead wasn't part of our original plan. It was Zeus's secret weapon, to be unleashed only if we had no other choice. It was a graviton pulse cannon mounted at the ship's core, powered by a weaponized singularity. it wasn't just dangerous. It was completely unstable. If it misfired, it could tear Zeus apart from the inside. You sure about this? I asked. Marcus's voice was steady. This is what we built it for. Let those bastards see what Earth really made in the darkness. I didn't argue. I armed the thunderhead. The console lit up with an ominous red glow. The weapon hummed low, almost like it was growling with anticipation. The alien obelisk spun toward me, preparing to fire its next shot. I fired first. Light burst from Zeus's core like a newborn star. It was blinding, burning. Pure white fury racing through space. It hit the obelisk dead center for a second. Nothing happened. Then the massive structure began to fracture. It didn't explode or disintegrate. It fractured like glass under impossible pressure. Cracks spread in all directions across its surface, and then it collapsed into itself. Vanishing in a silent implosion, the entire blockade field lit up instantly. Every other structure had noticed what happened. They spun toward Zeus like angry wasps. They were afraid, and that was good. We finally had their attention. Now we've got their attention. I muttered to myself. The navigation computer flagged. A narrow corridor, one thin path through the blockade where interference was weakest. It wasn't safe, but nothing about this mission had ever been safe. I gunned the thrusters and dove through the void like a bullet. The alien constructs opened fire with everything they had. Bright streaks of plasma and kinetic energy bolts tore through space. Around me, some shots missed, but some didn't. I felt. One ripped through the starboard wing. Another hit near the engine bay. Warning lights were screaming throughout the ship, still. Zeus pushed forward with stubborn determination. We weren't built to win a full war up here, not yet. This mission was about sending a message that was loud and clear. We're not dead. We're not quiet. And we don't forget what you did to us. As I reached the edge of the blockade, Zeus's systems began to fail. Power levels were critical. Oxygen was dropping. The hull was compromised in multiple places. Communications were flickering in and out, but I was still breathing, still flying, still alive. And then suddenly, everything stopped. The stars disappeared again, but this time it wasn't because of the lockdown. This was something else entirely. I found myself in a field of absolute darkness, cold and immense, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Then I saw it, a ship, but not really a ship. It was something much older and bigger than anything the Coalition had built. It looked abandoned and dead, but my instincts screamed that appearances were deceiving. Zeus's scanners went completely haywire. The readings showed unknown technology, unknown origin, and impossible mass readings. Yet somehow, it was watching and waiting. The stars hadn't just been blocked from Earth. They had been guarded by something ancient and terrible. And I had just knocked on the wrong door. For a moment, I thought I had died, and this was some kind of afterlife. All of Zeus's systems were still functional, but barely. There were no alarms, no vibrations, no ambient sounds, just thick, dead silence surrounding me like space itself had gone completely still. Zeus floated in the void, its hull scorched and venting microplasma from ruptured seams. The ship was breathing heavily, and so was I. We were both alive, but barely. What I saw ahead of me made my chest tighten with dread. It wasn't a ship in any traditional sense. There were no visible engines, no recognizable heat signatures. It hung in the darkness like a sleeping god, kilometers long. Its surface blacker than the space around it. It didn't shimmer or reflect any light. Instead, it seemed to drink light, absorbing it like a black hole made of metal and malice. Whatever this thing was, it had no right to exist here, floating just outside the blockade's edge like some unholy monument to forgotten nightmares. It felt ancient and silent, far older than anything humans had ever encountered. Zeus's scanners fed me nothing but meaningless data. Interference shredded every reading. All the information was corrupted or impossible to interpret. Whatever this thing was, it didn't want to be understood by minds like ours. My instincts told me to turn around and flee as fast as possible. But I hadn't come all this way just to flinch at the first real mystery I encountered. I let Zeus drift closer to the massive structure. The closer I got, the more it seemed to pull at my mind. Not physically or gravitationally, but psychologically. It was like looking at something human beings were never meant to understand. I don't believe in gods, but there was something about this ancient ship that made me feel like I had just walked into a temple built by the insane. It definitely wasn't built by the Coalition. That much was obvious. Their technology was sharp, practical, and brutal in its efficiency. This thing was old, older than the lockdown, maybe older than Earth itself. Then I saw the markings covering its hull. They weren't carved or printed into the surface. They were branded, like something had scorched them into the structure with celestial fire. It looked like a language, but it wasn't a language in any way we would understand. There was no alphabet, no recognizable pattern, just raw, angular symbols that made my head hurt the longer I stared at them. Each symbol felt like it meant something deep in my bones, in places where the human brain shouldn't have meaning. I didn't realize my nose was bleeding until the blood hit my lip. The markings were doing something to me just by being observed. Marcus. I whispered out of habit more than hope, only static answered. Communications were completely dead. Of course they were. This thing wanted absolute isolation from the outside universe. I rerouted power from the secondary stabilizers and approached what looked like an opening in the ship's hull. It was a jagged tear in the side, like a wound frozen in time. It was too precise to be natural damage, but too chaotic to be a design entrance. I don't know why I decided to enter that ship. Maybe it was madness brought on by isolation and stress. Maybe something deeper was pulling me inside against my better judgment. The moment Zeus crossed the threshold into the alien vessel, my lights flickered ominously. For the first time in my life, I felt truly observed. Not just watched, but understood. It was like every memory, every moment of pain, hate, and loss I had ever experienced was being pulled to the surface of my mind and carefully judged by something vast and alien. Zeus slowed automatically as we moved through the interior. Gravity had changed in impossible ways. I could feel it pressing against me, but not from outside. It felt like the gravitational force was coming from within me, as if my own body was being used against itself. Then, I heard a voice. It didn't come through the communication system or through any speakers. It spoke directly inside my head. "You are early," the voice said. I froze in my seat, checking the interface desperately. There were no signals detected, no psychic intrusion, technology showing up on any sensors, nothing to explain what I was hearing. But I had definitely heard it. The voice was deep and cold, not quite alien, not quite human, but something unsettling in between. I didn't respond at first. I couldn't find my voice. The alien presence continued, sounding almost disappointed. "You are wounded, angry, unripe." And yet they opened the cage. Cage. I finally managed to swallow and force myself to speak. "Who are you?" There was a long pause. Then the voice echoed again, deeper this time. "We are the answer, the one before, the reminder of what you could become." It was vague, ancient, and cryptic. Exactly the kind of mystical nonsense I had no patience for. "Are you part of the coalition?" I demanded. A sound like laughter, if you could even call it that, filled my mind. It sounded like a collapsing sun. "They are the lock. We are the door." I was done with riddles and metaphors. Why did they block Earth? Why the lockdown? Silence again. Then slowly, the strange markings around me began to glow with a dull red light, pulsing like a massive heartbeat, because of what your kind carries. The voice finally answered. That hit me harder than it should have. "They said we were too violent," I muttered. "Too aggressive, evolving too fast." "Yes, but that is not why they fear you." "Then what?" The voice leaned in impossibly close now, like it was whispering directly inside my skull. "Because you adapt to everything, even that which you were never meant to touch." A chill crept down my spine. "You mean our technology?" "We mean us." The floor beneath Zeus lit up with those same alien symbols. The ship shuddered, not from any impact, but from some kind of revelation. Suddenly, images flooded the cockpit screen. They weren't videos or recordings. They were visions, showing me things that had never happened but could happen. I saw human cities twisted into impossible alien geometries. I saw people with eyes like black holes, no longer recognizably human. I saw Earth not as it was, but as it could become if it merged with something dark, endless, and completely inhuman. "Your species was infected long before the lockdown," the voice continued. My stomach turned with nausea and fear. "That's just paranoid thinking," I muttered, but something inside me was starting to unravel. I remembered the scientist who had gone insane studying alien ruins found before the lockdown. I remembered the whispers they claimed to hear, the sudden suicides, the bloody equations they would scrawl on walls that no one could understand. We thought they were just mentally unstable from the stress. But what if they weren't? What if something had actually leaked into human consciousness? "Zeus," I whispered to my ship, "get us out of here." The ship didn't respond. Outside the cockpit, the alien markings surged brighter, changing from red to orange to white hot. "You are the child of fire and defiance," the voice continued. "You burned your way into the stars. And we felt it happen." I gritted my teeth. "If we're so dangerous, why not just destroy us?" "Because what you are cannot be destroyed, only delayed." Suddenly, A sharp pain lanced through my skull like a knife. I screamed, clutching my temples. My vision blurred and went dark around the edges. Inside my mind, I could feel something moving. Something with teeth and claws and hunger. I slammed my fist into the control panel. No, I shouted. A shockwave burst from Zeus's core. Maybe an automatic defense system. Maybe just rage given physical form. The cockpit jolted violently. Systems reactivated. Light surged back to full power. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned every thruster to maximum power and launched out of that nightmare ship as fast as possible. Hull integrity could go to hell. Something screamed behind me as I fled. It wasn't sound. Wasn't metal tearing. It was a psychic roar that seemed to crack something deep in the fabric of the universe itself. It was the sound of a prison door either slamming shut or swinging wide open. I didn't look back to find out which dot by the time I crossed the blockade edge again. The entire alien field had gone silent. The coalition of bellies had powered down completely. They didn't fire at me, didn't move, like they knew something fundamental had changed. Maybe they thought I had been consumed by whatever was in that ancient ship. Or maybe they were afraid that I hadn't been consumed at all. I re-established communications on the outer edge of Earth's orbit. At first there was only static. Then, Marcus's voice came through, strained and desperate. Zeus, are you alive? What happened up there? I hesitated, not sure how to explain what I had experienced. Then I said, I saw it. I saw what they built the blockade to contain. Marcus went quiet for a long moment. When he came back, his voice was tight with worry. Did it make contact with you? Another pause. Then I said the worst thing I could have possibly said. I think it was already inside us. There was dead silence on the communication line. Then Marcus spoke again, his voice much lower now. Get back to Earth now. I set the course manually, my hands shaking on the controls. The stars around me were twinkling again, but they felt different somehow. I wasn't the same man who had left Earth, and Zeus wasn't the same machine either. I could feel it humming with something new, something that wasn't part of the original design. The systems were running cleaner and smoother, like they had evolved and adapted during our encounter. Deep in my gut, I knew the ancient door hadn't just opened. Something had followed me out into normal space, and now it was coming home with me to Earth. The story of Zeus and Commander Shaw would continue, but something had fundamentally changed. Earth was no longer alone in the universe, and humanity was no longer entirely human. The real war was just beginning, and it wouldn't be fought with weapons or ships. It would be fought for the very definition of what it means to be human in a cosmos full of things that were never meant to exist. Together, whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same. The door had opened, and there was no way to close it again.